Welcome back. In this series, we are examining the relationship between goodness and suffering, between faith and pain. In our last episode, we looked at one of the conventional answers, which says that suffering is deserved because of sin. Today, we will look at three other conventional answers. The second one says that suffering is the work of Satan. There is a resident evil we call Satan or the devil in this universe, and he's the one who causes this suffering. And yes, there appears to be biblical evidence for this as well. In Revelation 12, we read about Satan pursuing the church of God, intent on their destruction. In Zechariah 3, we meet Satan accusing a very good man, the high priest Joshua, in the very presence of God. But ultimately, it's the book of Job that discomforts us, because it shows a man whose life is turned into a living hell by Satan. In these stories, God appears to be as much a victim of this resident evil as the inhabitants of earth. Nevertheless, like the first option, this option also poses serious questions. If God allows this resident evil to wreak so much havoc, does that imply God is impotent? Moreover, if there is an air of inevitability about the existence of good and evil, does this not imply in some form of dualism in the biblical data? Furthermore, we read passages like Isaiah 45 verse 7, where God himself says, "I form light and create darkness. I make success and create disaster. I, the Lord, do all these things." How should we interpret such a text? Such arguments depict God as either morally confused or powerless. And even the story of Job intimates that it was God who allows the tragedies. And so option 2 may not be very good. That brings us to option 3. This one says that suffering is a test. To explicate the nature of suffering posits that God is testing the faith of his people. Jesus himself taught his disciples to pray, "Do not lead us into testing, but deliver us from the evil one." Paul states that God will not allow his people to be tested beyond what they are capable of dealing with, but in doing so will provide a way out. 1 Corinthians chapter 10. The trouble with this approach is that it makes God to be the evil one. God is merely toying with his creation. God is whimsical and perhaps even capricious. How can a God who behaves in this manner be good? How can he be trusted? Well, perhaps this approach raises serious questions about God's goodness and integrity, and maybe it doesn't work as well. That brings us to the fourth conventional answer that's given. Suffering cannot be understood. Suffering cannot be explained. This is based on the concept of the inscrutability of God. This option says that God's ways are mysterious, and we simply do not have the answers that we need. And passages like Isaiah 55, 8 and 9 remind us that God's ways and God's thoughts are as different from ours as heaven are from the earth. And so what this argument says is that we must simply accept by faith that this is a reality. But to do so would make faith nothing more than an exercise in futility. This would seem such a travesty concerning the fact that God's best gift to the human race is intelligence, as argued by Kohelet. This approach succumbs to charges of predestination, predeterminism, with its inherent stoic acceptance as preordained faith, annulling the biblical notion of free will. Further, it does not absolutely explain the residence of evil in the world. It even perhaps makes God the source of that evil. So is there a way to understand all these issues, to face life's suffering and still maintain faith? That will be the focus of our next episode.